Hello, everybody. Good afternoon from Berlin. Good morning, good evening. And we are here starting our second day of online session. And this afternoon, we will start now at 2. And our aim is to close around 3:15 Central European time. We are very, very pleased to have you in the audience again. Last week, we had such an incredible afternoon together. It was very fruitful, loads of interesting discussions, and hopefully today won't be any different. We are sure that with these two great speakers that we have, we will be able to bring many interesting reflections, insights, and give the ground to the participants to ask questions, to get these questions answered here via Zoom. So please don't get afraid of raising your hand, asking your question, turning on your video, your audio. You also have the possibility to send your question through the Q&A button. You will find this button at the bottom of your Zoom, and you can write your question there. You can either direct your questions to one of our speakers or to both of them. That for sure they will be very helpful in answering everybody. Just a very important reminder, we would like to ask everybody to turn off the speaker. In the meantime, the other person is talking to avoid problems with audio and technical confusion. And even more important than that, it's to say that this is Culture and SDGs Enhancing Creative Cross-Sectoral Collaboration session. We started the online program on the 2nd, and now we are in the last day, in the 6th of September. And we are also looking forward to spend our week in Turkey very soon. We will be there, finally meeting each other, seeing each other's face, and being able to spend the whole week talking, exchanging, learning with and from each other. This is an initiative supported and funded by the European Union through the Cultural Relations Platform. And this is a project designed by the Culture and Sustainability Lab. And here with us today, representing this wonderful team who brought everybody together, I would like to introduce each of them. We have with us Alexandra. Say hi, Alexandra, please. We also have Pravali. We also have Said Kamal, and we also have Sheila. So we have people from India, from Indonesia, people from Brazil, that is my case, but living in Germany, Uzbekistan, and Alexandra is sitting and it's based currently in Austria. So we hope we will be helpful as well to the conversation. And just to give you in advance an idea of what we will have today, we will start with Miss Julia Lagahuzère. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, Julia. She's the co-founder of Opera for Peace, and she's going to offer us reflections on sustainability and the performing arts industry. And after Julia, we will have Miss Anaïs Roossens. I also expect that I pronounced your surname correctly, who is gonna also offer us some reflections, but on culture and education for sustainability. Ms. Anaïs, she's working with education and sustainability, educación y sustentabilidad in Spanish. After both presentations, we will then open for questions. And as I mentioned before, feel free to start thinking about your questions and perhaps writing them already during the presentation, so that we will have something around 15 minutes or a bit more if we shorten the wrap up session to be able to exchange. I would like to ask if somebody from our team still wants to say something before we introduce our speakers. All good. So we will move forward, and I would like to invite Miss Julia Lagahuzère. Oh, almost there, I hope. Julia, the floor is all yours for you to present. Please let us know if you have any problems with your presentation that we can share it from our side. But I hope the connection is helping everybody today. So you're welcome, and thank you very much for being here with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Pedro. I want to start by thanking the whole team for inviting me to this very interesting initiative that we have been fighting for. We've been trying to build up for the last couple of years. So I'm very happy to be here, and a big hello a big bonjour from Paris. So just a little bit about me and Opera for Peace, and then the project which I'm going to speak to you about today. So I've been working in opera for the last 20 years, specifically in casting, which means choosing the singers, working with the singers on a daily basis, putting together the productions and making sure everything works well. I was recently Deputy Casting Director of Opéra de Paris, and 3 years ago I decided to leave the traditional theatre opera business and set up a non-profit organization called Opera for Peace, which works towards giving opportunities to young opera singers, and not just singers. We also work now with stage directors and conductors and costume designers, amongst the other professions that make up opera. And this was something that was incredibly needed for our industry to move forward, to diversify audiences, to see new faces on stage, to make our field even richer than it already was. So it's a project which has developed in a very good way, as we are now the largest worldwide network for young opera professionals working in 6 continents. So very briefly, the idea of Opera for Peace is to detect talent all around the world and to give these young people the tools, which is mostly at this stage in terms of education and training, so that they become entrepreneurs, auto-entrepreneurs, artists in their own right, so that they can live from their art. In turn, these artists then become social entrepreneurs, becoming finally ambassadors for our values of diversity, equity, inclusion, sustainability, accessible, affordable education. So this is very briefly the idea of Opera for Peace. Now, one of our projects is called Circular Culture, because the idea of Opera for Peace is that we believe in artists. We believe that artists have a very important role in society. After COVID, during COVID, our field was in such a deep crisis where a lot of artists felt that they weren't being considered. And Opera for Peace wanted to help with this, wanted to show governments and other people, other organizations, sponsors, corporate sponsors, that we have something very important to say, not only as entertainment, and we know that entertainment is important, but also in terms of the greater social issues that our world faces today. So this was the idea of circular culture. And to put it into a context, we decided to use the SDGs, which of course, let's say, simplifies the world's biggest issues so that they are approachable to talk about and that there is a framework. So this is the idea of circular culture. I'm now going to share my screen and show you, start the presentation. Can you see the presentation? I think that's okay. Good. So I'm going to start here. So This is our logo of circular culture. I'm going to start here. I think that's the best thing. So circular culture brings together culture, performing arts, and the circular economy. Now, this is a mix of genres that have never been put together before. So this is a project that is extremely innovative. Why the values of circular economy? Because circular economy has a specific way of looking at sustainability and the world, and their values of making use of what we have of renewal, of innovation, really speaks to the artists and speaks to us in the performing arts, and I will explain how and why. So we see music and culture as a source of creation, renewal, connection, and of course, sustainability. A little bit of background. So this is a project that was launched in 2021, which was at the start of the UN International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. This, of course, was a very good news for our field because we had more resources, more attention around culture and around what we want to do for the future. So it is an innovative project linking the performing arts and the circular economy values, promoting climate protection and a better future for humanity through creative communication and shared goals. It is inspired by the Renaissance, where, as we know, art, philosophy, science came together to advance civilization and a new way of seeing the world. And this inspiration is pushed further for today's world with a strong societal engagement, as I said, structured around the SDGs for a better future. And we specifically collaborate with partners who want to think differently and want to find creative solutions. So for the purpose of today, circular culture is a big project, but for the purpose of today, I have condensed it into 3 C's, let's say. So connection, circularity, and creative communication. These 3 topics are totally intertwined and connected, and you will see that everything in the end comes together. But for simplicity's sake, we will do this in 3 parts. So the first part is connection. Connection is bringing people together, which is what culture does and what culture tries to do. And through music and through performing arts, we have the tools to bring people together in a very special way. And we believe that a fair society can only be a balanced society if it is economically, socially, and environmentally balanced. This was the idea of Opera for Peace, peace being a certain kind of balance in society where everybody has equal chances. Now, how does this relate to the SDGs? So we identified that SDG 16, peace, justice, and peaceful institutions, strong institutions, and SDG 10, which is reduced inequalities, is absolutely essential to creating a harmonious and balanced society through inclusion. So we have to include everybody if we're going to be able to connect. The next 2 SDGs that we wanted to speak about in relation to connection is, of course, relationships and partnerships. Relationships are what humans need to move forward. It's what culture can promote. And also partnerships is incredibly important, of course, for connection. Strategic partnerships, which is what Opera for Peace works towards. We have a very vast network of partners in 6 continents. So these ideas are extremely important when we think about connection and culture. I want to talk about a specific example, which I will be doing for each part. which is Opera for Peace started our academies this year in Rome in collaboration with the European Investment Bank. The idea was to connect different artists from different countries, different continents, to all come together and to study and learn and create in Rome for a week at the end of May, beginning of June of this year. Our next academy will be next year. So we had 20 artists coming together, as I said, on scholarships. So everybody was on an equal footing. And there was, of course, a lot of lessons, masterclasses from our Opera for Peace network. We have a lot of important star artists who give their time to what we do. And so this is, of course, one of the key actions of Opera for Peace, and of course also circular culture, because we had a lot of discussions about how artists can contribute to society and what specifically in their countries they can do to help. So we had positive peace workshops, we had a lot of roundtable discussions. So maybe if this is something you'd like to know more about, you can ask me at the end, because of course it was a very in-depth program, just to give you an idea of that today. And if we talk about key actions in relation to point number 1, which is connection. So positive messages of diversity inclusion in relation to circular economy values on respective platforms to promote social environmental harmony, sharing hashtags. So what does this mean? This means finding and working with strategic partners who can complement your work. One example, we have a collaboration with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a leading body in terms of circular economy. And this is in the beginning of a collaboration to think about how the performing arts and a very, let's say, strict circular economy organization can work together to find new ideas, new collaborations, new partners. This is something that was never done a couple of years ago. So in the beginning, this was incredibly innovative. I will always keep going back to education, because as we know, education is where everything starts. So educational initiatives, projects taking place on a local level to cultivate vibrant artistic scenes, enriching countries and carbon footprint. So not only flying off around the world, but also really using experience to enrich and to work with local communities. So one question, how can your projects appeal to non-traditional sectors in your area? Don't be scared to, if you're an artist, to maybe speak to energy companies. This is something that we never thought about a couple of years ago in opera. We were always very much connected to the traditional sponsor sectors, which were banks, luxury companies, jewelry, all these different kinds of sectors, which is traditionally associated with opera. We are now kind of breaking all those ideas and really speaking to different companies who through the project understand that culture can also help them on certain levels, which I will come back to. So this is point number 1. Point number 2 is, of course, circularity, which is in the title, circular culture, and a big part of circular economy. So let's say that the notion of circularity has deep historical, philosophical, and cultural origins. This we can see in nature. We can talk about renewal, renovation, all these different aspects to do with the world and coming full circle, seasonality. In music, we have a lot of circular ideas of music, riffs, ostinato in jazz. Many different forms of music use this idea of a circle, which was kind of the inspiration for circular culture, because we understood there were so many different things that could connect and bring together these two huge sectors for the first time. How does this relate to the SDGs? So for this point, we talk about, when we think about renewal, when we think about nature, of course, we think about SDG 13, which is climate action, which is to protect our nature, to develop nature, and also affordable and clean energy, because the idea of energy is that it's sustainable, and that we can live through the world's resources, which, as we know, are not infinite, unfortunately. So these two SDGs fit in strategically with the idea of circularity. There are key actions associated with this point. At this moment, I would like to talk about our series of concerts that we put together around circular culture in different cities, in different countries. And we start with a conference with artists who talk about their feelings about what's happening in the world. And we continue with a concert outside in nature, with the theme, the repertoire around nature. And there is so much of it in the repertoire, it's incredible. So of course, you know, we have Wagner's Ring, but this is not something that we young artists traditionally give in concert, as it's a very difficult music to sing. It's not necessarily for young people, but we have other ways. The whole of the 19th century, the whole Romantic movement was all to do with nature and man's relationship between himself and the world, the natural world. We see this in books as well, and other different artistic movements of the time. So the repertoire is around nature, around different ideas of humanity. So once you've had the conference, once you've identified the key problems, once we've had expert speakers speaking about a circular economy, which can be a little bit dry because they talk about recycling and waste management and other, let's say, unpassionate subjects. Once you team that up with young artists who express themselves with music and can talk about nature and can sing about nature, this brings everything to another level. And the public afterwards feels more emotionally attached to it. So this is something that I would like to suggest in terms of key actions. Let's say the creation of a global calendar of events, concerts, recitals, with musical and thematic links to circular economy and environmental values. This is something that works very, very well. Also the idea of the creation of a dedicated platform in order to inspire new artistic projects, linking both sectors. So this was part of our concert series. And a question, how do you create innovative projects using themes, for example, around climate protection? So the third and last point, which brings everything together, is called creative communication. And this is really this is my big subject when I'm asked to talk in different places: creative communication and shared emotion. Now, when we think about creativity, as is written here, is the capacity to produce something that is new, appropriate, and useful, then we see the strength of what artists can do, creating something new, something appropriate, something useful. This could be interesting for our world. So the two SDGs linked to, actually the 4 SDGs, but we start here, in terms of humanity and creative communication, is number 12, which is responsible and consumption. Also number 11, which I think is one of the most difficult SDGs, is sustainable cities. Why have we chosen these 2 SDGs? These 2 SDGs, I think, are, as I said, and after speaking to experts, the 2 that are the most complicated to achieve because they are on the biggest scale and we need everybody to adhere to what's happening. This is not something one can do with a small group or with one country. This is something that has to be shared by the world. And how can we inspire people to do this? Through creative communication and through culture. The other two linked to this particular point is through cultural education and support of our youth, because through education and through our young people, we will create the future that we need to be able to move forward. So how can culture help with creating sustainable cities? How can culture help with responsible consumption? And how can all of this come together? I want to give one example of this point, which I found incredibly inspiring and is a big point of our circular culture project. We have a partner called the Congo River Festival in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Vincent Kunda, I met last year at the UN in Geneva, and we kind of fell into each other's arms because we really had the same idea about how culture could contribute to a better world. And his project is really one of the most complete that I've seen. So he uses culture to inform about the pollution of the Congo River, which is one of the longest in Africa, and also about the state, environmental state of his country. So this is something that is absolutely necessary all around the world, but let's say it has a special significance in the Democratic Republic of Congo, because so many people rely on this river to make a living and for their health and for their well-being. So he has created a scientific committee where he brings together environmental specialists, also circular economy specialists from his country, and with some expert speakers from abroad to complete the panel. And then he has a whole week of concerts, of discussions with young people in different parts of his country, linking in nature, linking in everything. And it's really an incredible project that I think highlights the importance of creative communication. Because if you just, let's say, tell a group of kids what's happening, that's one thing. If you take them to the river, if you accompany it by music, if it's preceded by a discussion about what's happening, and then they live it through their bodies and through the music, this is something else. This is young people who will then contribute, let's say, to the health and to the survival of their country. So that's one concrete example of creative communication. Key actions. I talk a lot about bringing people together. I'm going one step further here by suggesting to create a think tank, especially for artists. This has been done in various ways. And I think this is something that can be developed, because we, as I said, we have all this creativity. How do we canalize that, and how do we actually find the solutions we need? Once again, a series of conferences looking at global themes from a unique perspective. And lastly, how are you making a global impact through culture? How can you go into your village, your town, your country, becoming an ambassador, and to work with local companies, local people, to really make a difference through what you do best, which is creative communication, which is your cultural expression and your unique artistic identity, which is what we, of course, encourage in Opera for Peace. So I think this is it for the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing now. And I hope that was clear. I tried to make it in 3 parts, which is easier to remember, I think. And I'd be delighted to take any questions if anybody wants to say anything specific. And of course, please, you can share the document, and my contact details are on the first page if somebody would like to see the full program and the full project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. It was really great. I really liked the structure of the three C's. It made things easier for us to understand. And I would like to highlight one important thing that you covered. There was a message for us to open the horizon. With whom can we talk about? To have a broader view, not only addressing usual partners, but other partners out there that can be helpful, that can engage themselves with the cultural sector once they perceive, they see the value that culture and arts can add to what they are doing. So thank you a lot. I would like now to invite Miss Anaïs, who is going to talk about culture and education for sustainability. So Anaïs, the floor, it's all yours. In the next 15 minutes, we'll be for sure enjoying your presentation. And after Anaïs' presentations, we will then open up for questions, okay? You're welcome, Anaïs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pedro Affonso. Thank you, Julia, as well. I thought it was a very interesting presentation, and we definitely have some things in common. You were mostly, of course, talking about performative arts, whereas I will be talking about education and visual arts. But the last of your 3 points was especially interesting to me, the one about creative communications, because this is what I have been working around for the last 2 or 3 years. So I'll introduce myself very shortly. My name is Anaïs. Good afternoon from Malaga. I have been working in different cultural institutions, both in Belgium and in Spain, for the last 6 years. I'm currently working in the Picasso Museum here in Malaga in the educational department. I develop our educational projects, educational programs, activities, and such. And I work with different audiences on a daily basis. And what I have come to realize over these last 6 years is that culture and arts, and in my case, visual arts, are such a powerful educational tool. And this is what I will be talking about in my presentation. So for the last 2 years, I've been combining both my work as an art educator in the Picasso Museum and my work as a consultant on sustainable development with my colleague, Lucia Vázquez. She couldn't be here today, so I'm replacing her. So I will share my screen as well and show you the presentation. So I hope that you can see this. This is perfect, thank you. So I'll be talking, as I said, about culture and education for sustainability today. As I mentioned before, I think culture is an amazing educational tool. And one of the reasons, I think, is because culture, let's say work of art, can evoke an emotional response rather than a purely theoretical one. This emotional response makes the viewer connect to the artwork and to the subject, to the theme of the artwork, and it makes it more interesting. I will give you an example. Let's say you have to talk about our excessive consumption and production in our society, the consumption and production patterns we have. Imagine you have to talk about this kind of difficult subject to a group of students, a group of young people. You can show them graphs, hundreds of graphs and charts, and show them astounding numbers of the amount of waste we generate. But you will never get the same response that you might if you were to show them an artistic image. I brought you an example here. This is a photograph of artist Nick Brandt. You can see a photograph of an elephant he had taken years before, which he placed on a billboard, and he placed in exactly the same place where he took the photograph. So he shows us the harsh reality of how the ecosystem of this animal has changed, how we as human beings are occupying their spaces and the amount of waste we generate. So this image, as I said before, evokes an emotional response. But not only that, it makes us think, it makes us reflect on the subject. And more so, talking about the work of art could be painting, a sculpture, could be an opera, Julia, could be anything. It has great didactic value. Talking about it opens up a dialogue, opens up even a debate where students or participants can voice their opinions, but also hear about different points of view. And all of this has great didactic value. So talking about a work of art improves language skills, listening skills, but also cognitive skills, and especially what you were talking about before as well, critical thinking, which is so important. As I said, I have been working in museums, so my experience is mostly in visual arts, not really performative arts. So I brought you another example of a work we used to talk about gender and identity. It is a painting, I'm sure you will all know, of famous Mexican painter Frida Kahlo. You can see her, it's self-portrait, she's sitting down in her chair. You can see scissors in her right hand, long locks of hair on the floor. She has cut her hair short, and she's wearing a suit, kind of almost a masculine suit, which is kind of large. Her hair is short, but she's wearing earrings, and if you take a closer look, it kind of looks like she's wearing makeup. So this is a work that, in my experience, works very well, especially with secondary degree students, to talk about gender and identity. It does not only open up a dialogue or a debate about gender, but it makes students reflect and think on about their own identities, about who they are and what defines them. So these two examples, the one by Nick Brandt and the one by Frida Kahlo, of course, were chosen to relate to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, because this is why we're here today. But I wanted to tell you that arts and artworks and artistic images can be used to talk about any subject, even subjects in the traditional educational curriculum, such as mathematics, history, chemistry even. So I think culture and artworks in specific should be introduced in the traditional curriculum, not just in the one subject, but across the disciplines. I think there should be a mix, and this is something I wanted to go back as what Julia, what you said, what you mentioned before as well, when you mentioned that your project was based on the Renaissance, which was a mixture of science and art and philosophy. So many contemporary artists are again mixing disciplines. They are blurring the lines between science, technology, and arts, such as in this artwork, for example, by Bernard Smilde, which is a condensation cloud. I think that's the same idea. We should approach it from the same idea in education. It should be taught across disciplines, and culture should be introduced and integrated in the whole curriculum across the disciplines. Now, going back, of course, to the Sustainable Development Goals, which is why we're here. Education, as we can all agree, is the future. Education is very important, which is why it has its own SDG as well, as we all know, which is number 4. Audrey Azoulay from UNESCO also says that it can be a powerful lever to transform our relationship with nature, and that we must invest in this field to preserve the planet. Now, culture does not have its own SDG, but it is mentioned in some of the sub-goals or the targets of the SDGs. And an example is target 4.7 of SDG 4 of education. 4.7, as you can see on the bottom of the text, mentions culture, the appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. Culture and education, to me, are inseparable. They should go hand in hand always, because they have an amazing transformational power. And that's exactly what we need to achieve the SDGs. To get to a more sustainable and more inclusive and just future, it is not enough to just raise awareness and to just teach people about the SDGs. What we need is a transformation, a big transformation. We need a disruptive change of values and identities. What we need is actually to create a new society or new citizenship, if you will, that has a set of values or a system of values that are aligned with sustainable development. Cooperation, empathy, connection with nature, and all of those can be taught through culture and education. Now there have been many opinions and many proposals for this new system of values. I have brought just one example of a Spanish professor and a Spanish teacher, and he's a philosopher as well, who writes in his book about the shift we have to make in our society towards a new set of ethics, ecological ethics, which are based on the principles we can see here on this slide. And incidentally, the first one is about culture, is about cultural and biological diversity, but also sense of measure, durability, the enjoyment of beauty, and then the construction of bonds, both with humans and non-humans. So he proposes a shift towards a new set of values, a new set of ethics for a more sustainable future in touch with nature. This is just one example. Of course, there have been many proposals, but to transmit or to teach all of these values, or culture and education, are simply key. They are pillars. And so culture, as I said, and I will mention this many times, culture and education, they go together hand in hand, and they are needed. And in this idea, of course, schools and teachers are key elements, very important, but not just schools and teachers, but also other kinds of non-formal education, and of course, cultural institutions such as museums. I brought you in one practical example of a museum that I think has aligned its core values, its activities, and its contents with the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's the Museum of Rural Life in Tarragona, in Catalonia. This museum wants to teach about the past of the Mediterranean rural life, wants to preserve it, but also wants to share its cultural legacy. So if you visit the museum, you can discover how Mediterranean peasants used to live, and the tools and technologies they used to make wine and oil. The museum offers a wide variety of educational activities. One example that comes to mind is a family activity where families can gather, can collect and taste fresh honey while learning about the importance of bees and other insects in the ecosystem. But also on their website, they offer educational materials, games and activities for each and every one of the Sustainable Development Goals, and aligned with their content of their museum. So this is just, of course, one example of a museum, of a cultural institution that's been working towards integrating the Sustainable Development Goals. But there are so many good examples, and I have seen for the last couple of months, in the last couple of years, that in cultural and educational sector, more and more things are being done, more and more is happening, and communication is key in that as well, as you said, Julia. So this gives me hope. I'm looking around to museums, cultural institutions, schools, and other types of non-formal education, and I'm seeing so many great projects and great initiatives, and it gives me hope for a sustainable future, which is my last slide, which I'm going to leave you with, in the words of David Buckland: another world is possible, and I firmly believe so, especially with the help of culture and education. So I will stop sharing my screen, and this was it.
Thank you, Anaïs. Really lovely. Thank you. One thing you said really touched my heart. I mean, I was always more affectionated by the humanity sides, no? When I was still studying, and I had many problems with maths, physics, chemistry, no? Exact sciences, and I was wondering, why don't they make it easier, no? And you said something about using the visual elements at school, using arts and culture to involve and to engage, and also, the mix of disciplines, professionally speaking, cross-disciplinary approaches. So we now see visual artists working with AR, VR, and sometimes even with performing artists, merging them together. It was really interesting to see practical examples of this integration of the sustainable development framework and agenda in cultural institutions, how museums now are adopting that and how schools are also adopting that. So my mind, it's really flourishing with few questions. I want to check if somebody wants to ask a question at this point. Please feel free to really raise your hand or open your mic and your video, or only your mic if you feel more comfortable with, and we can move forward from that. If nobody has a question so far, I would like to ask mine, but I want to check, to give 3 seconds. Okay, I'm gonna warm up them and the audience can come. Pravali, I see you raised your hand. Is that correct?
No, Pedro, go ahead. It seems to be a technical glitch with my system today.
Okay, that's okay. That's all right. So I wanted to ask a question for both of you. We naturally are seeing that the cultural sector, it's trying to make connections with other sectors, and I will remember I remember what Julia said about looking for other partners that are not necessarily usual partners. And I also saw Anaïs presenting how culture can be integrated in schools and also institutions overall speaking. We know that this is a 2-avenue effort. No? The cultural sector needs to proactively look to other partners, but do you see other partners from other sectors that are not so usual looking and being active, searching for artists, for instance? Do you see, for instance, in your field, in your perspective, a bank, a city council looking for artists, or industry looking for artists to resolve their problems? How do you perceive that? If you see that these 2 ways, us looking for them, it's complemented by them looking for us, or it's much more about us looking for them?
Shall I go first, Anaïs? Do you want to start?
No, go ahead.
Okay. This is not something, Pedro, that's going to happen automatically. I mean, this is really something that's going to take a while, unfortunately. We've started now for the last couple of years, and things are coming. For example, we've approached energy companies, energy sectors, and of course, this is typically non-traditional cultural partners, at least not for opera. So it hasn't been easy, but through the presentation of the Circular Culture project, just talking on from my side of things, it was, let's say, easy to show the potential connections. So we have to be very educational, we have to be very patient and very, let's say, ambitious and courageous to contact these people and just say, listen, I know you think there'd be nothing to do with renewable energies and opera, but actually there is. And if you take some time to think about it, we can discuss it. And listen, half the time it doesn't work, half the time people are interested but don't understand. And you might get 1 or 2 leads, which maybe one of them comes out of it, and you've done something innovative, and then you have something to work, to build on. So these are sectors, concretely, if I'm speaking, that we have approached that have more or less a rate of success. The sectors that have contacted us are pretty interesting. They're technological sectors. We're talking about video games. So we're talking a lot about metaverse. Metaverse, of course, I think everybody knows what this is. It's not very clear, but we have an idea of what it is. And the metaverse now want to integrate more and more cultural, musical and performing elements to enrich that world. So metaverse has been something pretty interesting. We've had quite a lot of interest also from NFTs, blockchain companies. So this is maybe something, let's say, obvious, because like sports, you know, music is a commodity that can work on these new platforms. So this has been a lot of people approaching us, because people need talent. They need talent to create these projects. They need material, they need people, and they need communities. So this is something that culture can offer. It's not 100% clear how this is going to work and how things advance. I don't think these are sectors that are very readable for a lot of people. So it takes a lot of time, but we don't close our doors to anything. So if anyone has any questions about NFTs, metaverse, this kind of thing, I can maybe try and reply, because we've been studying a couple of projects. That's all I want to say for now for the real, like, non-traditional sectors.
Well, I'll quickly give my point of view. I think you're absolutely right, Pedro, that it should be a two-way street, but unfortunately it isn't. It's still very often coming from the cultural sector. We have been working with some schools, and with them we always try to arrange for cross-disciplinary partnerships. We arrange for not just the teachers, but the students as well, to get in contact with local businesses, with local government and policymakers, so they can learn about the subject from different points of view. So I don't know if this is one of the cross-disciplinary ideas, but it always comes from the school, so it doesn't go the other way around. So I think that is something to be worked on, definitely.
Thank you, both of you. We have now 4 questions, and we will try to answer the 4 of them. The first one is from Nadia Perez. Nadia, it's one participant that will be with us in Turkey next week. She's from Mexico, and she asked, the opera productions are very expensive in cost and resources. How to make them affordable and sustainable? I believe, Julia, this is for you.
Yeah, this one's for me. Yeah, opera is the most complete art form, incorporating so many different elements. So it is, of course, traditionally an incredibly expensive art form, which is why we never make money in opera ever. And we're always looking for sponsors and always looking for people to come and help. It is an industry now that is looking to become sustainable, like every other industry in the world, in terms of costumes, the idea of fast fashion, that we try and be as sustainable as we can with the costumes, also with the sets. It's a very big question. I will touch on a couple of little things. So, for example, with the opera stage sets, normally in the past, every single opera director wanted to have their own unique staging, and it had to be built every single time for every new production. This, of course, is not sustainable, and it's not something that is that we want to do in the future. So now we talk a lot about what the opera house actually has in stock and how that can be adapted to a new production. So we've gone the other way, which I think is very important. I just want to say one thing. Of course, if we're talking Opéra de Paris level, it's expensive, and we can't have this level maybe in other countries. But remember that opera is the sung voice, and the sung voice requires absolutely nothing. We don't even need a violin, we don't need a piano, we don't need a book, we don't need anything. Everyone has their voice. So opera is, let's say, potentially available to every single person in this world who has a voice and who wants to learn how to project the voice. So, you know, opera can just be one person singing. Then, of course, if we want to add in costumes, a little bit of decor, a small music ensemble, there are varying ways of producing opera, and it doesn't have to be the most extravagant in the most extravagant way. So, you know, everything needs to be seen in its own particular context, its own particular country. And here I will say, this is the importance of strategic partnerships, because maybe, you know, your fellow country or your village or whoever has the costumes, you have the idea of the decors, you have the musicians. It's a collaborative affair. It's obviously a very complicated question, and I haven't answered 100% the question, but think about strategic partnerships, the idea of simplicity, which is going back to what the human voice is, that needs nothing, and then slowly building on that. So yeah, that's my answer to that very complicated question.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for giving your views and opinions. We have one attendee who raised the hand that I can see here, Rashida Namulondo. If you could please introduce yourself very quickly, I think we will be able to hear you from now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rashida Namulondo, and I'm from Uganda. I hope everyone hears me. So the question, I have to ask two questions, and I'll give you a little context of my country in Uganda. So in my country in Uganda, we've, as artists, we've done a lot of partnerships with very various organizations. But the question for me has always been the question of sustainability. So a lot of non-traditional partners or businesses will jump on a project, depending on which kind of artist you are anyway, if you have leverage or if you have like a brand, and they will support you for that project. But the question has always been like sustainability beyond one project, beyond one show. And I'm just like wondering if you've experienced that, where you have, for example, a bank, or we've had banks, we have had schools, even like ministries support certain projects, but it's just a project. And at the end of that project, you have to go back constantly as an artist. And so this is tiring for most artists because there's no leverage for like 5 years or more to create work. And the other question that I want to ask, especially using art for sustainable development, is always the question of the process versus the product. This is just our own experience back home, that like, for example, I do a lot of, I use art for peace building and initiating conversations around discrimination and extremism and radical narratives. But there's always like a clash between the process and the product. And I don't know how to frame that. But so then most artists who produce certain products are left out when it comes to SDGs or using art to like contribute to change, because most communities work with the process vis-a-vis the product. I just want any conversation on that, any thoughts on that? Thank you.
Anaïs, if you would like to start.
Yes, I think
just a second, just to remember everyone that we only have 15 minutes. So if you could briefly answer, we would be able to get the two other questions remaining. Thank you.
Okay. I will try to make it very short. The first issue that you mentioned about, well, what would be artists or other sectors kind of jumping on the chance to get a name for themselves for a sustainability project and then leaving it right afterwards is definitely a problem. Because sustainability in itself is a long-term, should be a long-term plan. So what we offer now me and my colleague we offer to accompany both cultural and non-cultural institutions in the integration on the SDGs on the long term. So we have a step-by-step plan. If you like to check our website, we have a step-by-step plan how to integrate them, not just for a brief time period, but for the long term. It's actually about making a change and adhering to that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Julia, if you want to jump in.
Sure, yeah. I'm going to be very concrete, so we only have a couple of minutes. Sponsors want to see that what they are sponsoring will have success and will have impact. That is the common thread of every single sponsor and every single company that I've spoken to over the last years. So I think the most important thing, I don't know how you approach your projects, but the most important thing is to document everything you do while you're doing it, so that afterwards you can make a presentation and you can show the success of your project. So you need to hire a photographer, you need to hire someone who can do video and someone who can design something. It's a budget, and it's irritating because it's the budget you want to put into the art. But unless you do this, there will not be a second year. I mean, we've learned from very hard experience that you have to really show what you've done. You need results. This, I don't know your project, but this could maybe be one of the reasons why it's been difficult to leave a support year after year, because, you know, there's a lot of greenwashing. There's a lot of people who don't care about the second year. But if you show them that their money has made an impact, that they have nice photos, that their president has had an interview on the television, that they look good in front of their board, you will get a second year, and hopefully a third year, by presenting a 3-year project, which is what you should always do, is always present projects in long term, not just a one shot. So that's the kind of the practical things that we've learned that make a sponsor say yes year after year.
Thank you, Julia. Now we move to the third question coming from Virginia Sanfelice. She's also one of our participants from Italy, an environmental lawyer, and her question is: arts, visual and cultural expressions, exhibitions, opera, etc., have an important role to bring up awakening society for SDGs. In your opinion, what needs to be done to put action into practice?
I'll try and answer very briefly. This is more or less the same answer I gave before, that when we offer to accompany cultural institutions in the integration of the SDGs, there are many steps to be followed. Now, whether we're working with schools or companies or cultural institutions, there's always two parts to the integration of the SDGs. One is introducing it in the contents of the museum, for example, or in the lesson plans in the educational institution, so towards the outside, towards the public. And the second one is to make changes, long-term changes within the institution. Energy use, food suppliers in schools, cafeterias, or something like that. So there's always two parts of it. And I think to get to action, we need to, I think there are already many things being done, as I said before. And it is very important, of course, to teach and to raise awareness, but it is not enough. As you said, we need to do more.
Very quickly, I agree that we need to do more, but I feel kind of positive about the way things are going. Culture is seen to be taken more seriously, and with increased EU funding and increased projects, and just what we're doing today, this would have been unthinkable 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So just to show how things are moving on, and it's a question of spreading the word, and this we can do, of course, through social media and through being innovative and taking chances and getting yourself invited to different places and talking about culture. I've often been the only person in culture in various places. I mean, it wasn't particularly comfortable because no one knows why you're there. But if you can talk to one person or two people about what you're doing, it gets people thinking. And then hopefully by planting the seed, you know, actions happen and partnerships happen.
Thank you, both of you. And here we have one question from Mona Abu Azam. She says, I want to ask about how you plan to share with, I believe, the local community in your project, or you look at them as just as targets. Thank you. I think it's the way you engage with the community, I believe. How do you share the things you do, or if they are just target?
I think this question is maybe more directed towards Julia, because in itself, schools and museums and cultural institutions, well, what we do, we involve the local community, the visitors of the museum, the families of the students. So I think, Julia, maybe this question is more.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, opera houses, which is the sector I know the best, do a lot of work to try and bring new people into the door, you know, into the doors, and try and get people involved and try and make these very, let's say, very scary buildings accessible. You know, an opera house is usually the most beautiful building in the town or in the country, and it's very difficult for certain people to walk in. So, you know, opera houses really try and make this accessible. And I think really one of the keys is in terms of diversity. And as I said, showing different artists on stage, diversifying what we do, having different ambassadors, people who look different is really important. This is how we engage the whole community, of course, through education, also musical education, music in schools, all these different kind of projects, and getting the local community involved. I mean, it's really just the outreach programs where we put money into education and into outreach, and we sometimes go to people, or we, you know, force them in, and once they're in, maybe half like it, maybe 5 like it, but that's already a positive result. And of course, we all have to work with the local community. These are our villages, these are our people, and everything we do should have an impact on the community.
Thank you. Very, very, very unfortunately, our Q&A time has come to an end. However, I would like to let everybody know, especially the ones who asked questions that couldn't be answered here, that the slide presentations from both participants, from both presenters, will be shared. And I'm pretty sure that we will also be able to keep up the conversation later on. But just to register, we have currently up to 37 participants. Here we also received a few comments from Lee Wan, who is also one of our participants. Thank you, Anaïs. Thanking Anaïs for the insights. She's also involved in education and interest in how education can transform people's perspectives. And also she also sent a comment to Julia saying that she wants to follow up on your point relating to bringing performing arts to metaverse, as she also works with metaverses, and she is asking if you have ideas on creative ways that metaverse can support in related to performing arts. We also have a fellow Brazilian, Rodolfo, who's saying that we need more and more artists and cultural sector workers as entrepreneurial agents. And then one comment from Galu Anindito, saying that human civilization starts with arts and culture, literature, music, and etc. However, in his country or her country, I'm sorry, art and culture is not considered as the main pillar in education. And the question goes probably to Anaïs, asking how can you create this collective understanding about the importance now of arts and education. So I think we could cover mostly most of the questions. Now we are very, very, very thankful, because today we really could see how culture is interconnected naturally and also instrumentalized to other sectors, that we shouldn't be afraid of knocking doors. We see that as the culture and art sector, we are still being very proactive, as it was mentioned by our speakers, in looking for people. So it's really good to think that we need to convince, and we have many artistic ways to convince as well partners, through performing, through visualization, through the way we express ourselves. So we can use our own tools to be able to achieve and to reach other partners, other funders, and other associates to what we want to do. We are approaching the end of this second online session. So I really want to thank Anaïs and Julia once more for the presentation. In addition to both of them, I would like to thank you, Alexandra. I would like to thank you, Pravali, Said Kamal, and Sheila. These are the team members who are organizing and bringing everybody together, both offline and online. Remembering that this session, Friday's sections from last week, and also our offline section next week, almost next week. Yeah, next week in Turkey, we will be seeing each other. It's now supported by the European Union through the Cultural Relations Platform. And just to give you an example how collaboration can flourish through these conversations, this team I'm talking about has met through the Cultural Relations Platform, brought this idea, moved it forward with this idea, and now we are here being able to discuss, to exchange, to learn, and enjoy this moment together, to have the possibility to listen to experts coming from different fields, different areas. So what we are talking about, it's already true in what we are currently doing right here. Anybody else wants to say something before we come to our official end? No. So I thank you, everybody who participated, all the participants from every single corner of the world. We had people today, so we could spread our message all over. I wish you a very pleasant afternoon, evening, or morning, and we will be seeing each other very, very soon next week in Turkey. Take care, everybody. Please keep your eyes open to our emails. We will be sending you a few emails in preparations, and see you very soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.